Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Vikings Latest. I am your host, Cole Smith, and today we're going to talk about the draft. We're only 1 week away from the draft, one of the most exciting times of the entire NFL offseason. So let's begin with a Jordan Schultz report this week where Schultz talked about how teams in the top 10, they're just not finding teams outside the top 10, having a lot of interest in trading up. Teams are kind of wanting to hold on to their future draft capital. The 2027 class is going to be considered much stronger than this year's is. That's not just a quarterback, that's across the board at all positions. This year, we might only see 2 first round quarterbacks, and that's even if Ty Simpson even gets drafted in the first round. Next year, we could see 5, maybe 6 first round quarterbacks. Teams don't want to move off of the opportunity to potentially select a franchise quarterback next year. And like I said, there's other players at other positions that are superior to their 2026 counterparts. So, how that impacts the Vikings is that there has been speculations that Minnesota could potentially move into the top 10 to draft Notre Dame running back Jeremiah Love. And I haven't been super high on trading this much for Jeremiah Love. Like, I'd really be a fan if the Vikings could land him somehow. I'd just rather them, like, wait till he gets like 11 or 12 before thinking about trading up. I don't want to be trading into the top 10. I just don't want to give up either a first round pick next year or too many picks this year. We already have 4 of the top 97 picks in the 2026 draft. I don't want to be giving up, too much just to do that for a running back. We don't really have, a run heavy offense anyway. And there's too many other holes on the roster to address. I'd rather just stick and pick at worst or potentially trade down. And I'm not the only person who thinks the Vikings could trade down. Alec Lewis of The Athletic, he believes the Vikings could trade down as well. His vibe, his feel from talking to NFL personnel, evaluators, and executives around the league is that the sweet spot in this year's draft is between pick 30 and 70. Right now, the Vikings only have 1 pick in that range, and that's pick 49 in the second round. Now, how could the Vikings get more picks? Obviously, by trading down from pick 18, potentially trading Jonathan Grenard too. That's a whole different story. But they could trade down from pick 18 and, accumulate a few more picks. Because right now, like, even when I'm like doing mock drafts or look at mock drafts, it's like, I'd be okay with that guy. I'd be okay with that guy. Like, there's several options that I'd be okay with. It's like, man, might as well just almost trade down. I don't want to like totally overthink it and just trade down just for the sake of trading down like the Vikings did in Kwesi Adolfo-Mensa's first draft back in 2022. But if the opportunity presents itself to where the Vikings could get good return, extra picks, on day 2 this year, maybe a first round pick in 2027, I'd be all for that. So I don't think the Vikings should just completely dismiss the idea of trading down just because they don't want to be like Kwesi Adolfo-Mensa. Like, I think that whole process was flawed, and we've seen some teams trade down before, and it works out really well for them. So don't do it if there's just like, if Jeremiah Love are somehow at 18, you don't trade down there. But, if you have like a couple options that you like, but you think that there's also some players that can address those same needs, in the 30s they're kind of similar in draft grade, I say it's something to explore. So that takes us to me actually doing an exercise trying to see what that looked like. I went to the PFF mock draft simulator today just to see what a potential trade could look like and how many teams would actually be interested in trading up with the Vikings. Now, to be clear, this is just one draft. This is just one simulation. I could have run this 10 times and probably gotten 10 different results. This is just one individual simulation. So in the simulation, once the Vikings were on the clock at pick 18, Oregon tight end Kenyon Sadiq was on the board, and the Vikings should be interested in potentially acquiring Sadiq because TJ Hawkinson is set to be a free agent. After the season, the Vikings could use another pass catcher completely, and Sadiq is just insanely athletic for a tight end. But for the sake of trading down and this exercise, I explored trade options, and there was only one option available, and it was trading down to pick 37 with the Giants. This looks eerily familiar to the Kwesi Adolfo-Mensa trade that I was talking about earlier. So to trade down to pick 37, the Vikings would be giving up pick 18, and then their pick 97. That's their second, third round pick in this draft. In return, they'd be acquiring the 37th overall pick, and then they'd also be acquiring the Giants' first round pick in 2027. And like I said, 2027 draft class is supposed to be regarded as far superior to this year. And now, so you're probably trying to wonder, would the Vikings actually be coming out ahead in that? So, you know, just draft charts in general, even if the Giants were to somehow win the Super Bowl next year, the Vikings would still be coming out ahead. Even with that, it'd be the equivalent of the Vikings like gaining the 252nd overall pick in next year's draft, according to the Fitzgerald Spielberger draft chart. And then that just gets better, the worse that the Giants perform. Even if they finish where the Eagles did this year with the 23rd overall pick, Vikings would still be coming out way ahead. That's like the first pick of the 6th round. And it just keeps getting better. I don't think the Giants are going to win the NFC East this next year. And so the Vikings would be coming out ahead just based off that. And that's just assuming that the 2027 class is equal to 2026. And like I keep saying, 2027 class should be far superior. I think the Vikings could get a lot of value in that. So who would the Vikings pick at 37 in this simulation? So available players were Lee Hunter, Texas Tech defensive lineman, Christian Miller, Georgia defensive lineman, D'Angelo Pons, cornerback out of Indiana, or Zion Young, edge rusher out of Missouri. I took Young off the board just because the Vikings have Andrew Van Ginkel and Dallas Turner, and right now Jonathan Grenard. Even if they trade Grenard, I think that they'd probably try addressing a different need instead. There was a report from Alec Lewis last week that the Vikings, he just doesn't see the Vikings taking a cornerback within the first 2 rounds. He thinks that the feeling inside the building is that Brian Flores is comfortable with Byron Murphy Jr., Isaiah Rodgers, and James Pierre. So that probably takes D'Angelo Pons off the board in this scenario. So that leaves the Vikings with Christian Miller and Lee Hunter. And I just took Christian Miller from Georgia. All 4 of these guys are stacked the same way on the industry consensus big board. Just using a little bit of context from what I've been hearing, I think they go defensive line in this specific scenario. Christian Miller kind of goes with Jalen Redmond, and then the Vikings still try figuring out that third defensive tackle spot, whether they want to use Levi Drake Rodriguez in a bigger role or Tyrion Ingram Dawkins this year. Still, even with that, the Vikings didn't gain any initial, immediate picks in the 2026 draft, but the rest of this draft actually ended up looking pretty good. As I finished out the simulation, the Vikings still wound up with AJ Halsey, safety out of LSU, at pick 49, Sam Hecht, center out of K-State, at pick 82, Damon Claiborne, running back out of Wake Forest, at pick 163, then Tanner Koziol, tight end out of Houston, at pick 196, then Caden Wetjen, receiver out of Iowa in the 7th round, DJ Harvey, safety out of USC in the 7th round, then their final pick, Parker Brailsford, center out of Alabama. That'd be phenomenal value. Even though the Vikings already got a center, Brailsford does have a little bit of experience at guard. Could potentially be like a swing option, utility option along the offensive interior. So even with the Vikings not gaining any additional picks in this hypothetical trade down for the 2026 draft, they still walk out with a ton of needs filled. Could potentially have 4 instant contributors / starters in Miller, Halsey, Hecht, and Claiborne. Claiborne would probably be RB3, but Aaron Jones is 31. He's always kind of struggled to stay healthy. Jordan Mason, he's never carried a full workload, a full season. So I could see Claiborne easily, or whoever at running back, easily being in the mix immediately this season. And then obviously going into the 2027 season, they'd be battling for the RB1 job outright. So that's what I gathered today. I think this could be a very fun draft. The Vikings could go several different directions in the draft. I think that they could come out as a much better team no matter what they do, as long as they're smart and don't, oversell the future. to address immediate needs. So thank you for tuning in. Like, subscribe. We'll be back tomorrow. Let's Skol, Vikings fans.